Every dollar you own is sitting inside a system that was not designed to protect you. Your bank account, your brokerage, your retirement fund. All of it exists inside a structure where governments can freeze assets, banks can restrict withdrawals, and inflation can silently drain your purchasing power while you sleep. We watched it happen in Lebanon in 2019 when banks locked their doors and citizens couldn't access their own savings. We watched it happen in Canada in 2022 when protest-linked accounts were frozen without a court order. We watched it happen in Cyprus in 2013 when depositors woke up to discover the government had seized a percentage of their bank balances to fund a bailout. The mainstream advice says, keep your money in domestic banks, max out your 401,000, trust the system. That advice is a cage dressed up as a plan. What if everything you've been told about where to keep your wealth is optimized for the system's survival, not yours? There are legal structures, exposed in IRS publications, codified in international treaties, and used daily by the ultra-wealthy, that allow you to move your money outside the reach of any single government, any single banking system, any single currency collapse. These aren't tax evasion schemes. They're reported, filed, and fully compliant. And the reason you've never heard of them isn't that they're illegal. It's that nobody profits from teaching you how to leave. By the third method in this video, you'll understand a structure so effective that entire nations have built their economies around attracting people who use it, and why the IRS has known about it for decades and never shut it down. The wealth trap nobody talks about. Before we get into the three methods, you need to understand the architecture of the cage you're sitting in, because most people don't realize they're trapped until the door slams shut. In 2010, the United States passed the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, FATCA. On the surface, it was designed to catch tax evaders hiding money overseas, but what it actually did was turn every bank on earth into a reporting agent for the IRS. Under FATCA, any foreign financial institution that wants to do business in US dollars, and virtually all of them do, must report the accounts of American citizens directly to the US Treasury. If a bank refuses, gets cut off from the dollar system, that's financial death. The result? The United States became the only country on earth with global financial surveillance built into international banking law. If you're an American citizen, the IRS knows about every bank account you hold anywhere on the planet, provided the balance exceeds $10,000 at any point during the year. You're required to file an FBAR, a foreign bank account report, with FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, annually. Failure to file carries penalties up to $100,000 per violation, or 50% of the account balance, whichever is greater. Now here's what's fascinating. FATCA didn't make foreign accounts illegal, it made them visible, and visibility is not the same thing as prohibition. The ultra-wealthy understood this immediately. They didn't stop using offshore structures. They simply made sure every structure was fully reported, fully compliant, and fully legal. The difference between them and you isn't legality, it's knowledge. Meanwhile, 113 countries signed onto the OECD's Common Reporting Standard, CRS, which does the same thing FATCA does, but globally. Banks and signatory nations automatically share account information with the taxpayer's home country. The surveillance net is planet-wide, and yet, within this net, there are legal corridors that allow you to restructure where your wealth sits, how it's protected, and what jurisdiction has authority over it. These corridors aren't loopholes. They're load-bearing pillars of international finance. Governments built them on purpose. So why would governments create legal pathways for money to leave their borders? Because capital is like water. If you try to dam it completely, it finds a way around, usually through illegal channels. Governments learned centuries ago that controlled outflow is preferable to uncontrolled flight. The British Empire didn't collapse because money left London. It collapsed because the structures that channeled capital through London stopped being trusted. The legal pathways exist to keep the system functional. The question is whether you'll use them or let someone else benefit while you sit inside the cage, wondering why your purchasing power keeps shrinking. Sign 1. The Offshore Trust, your money's bodyguard with a legal badge. In 1984, a man named Ferdinand Marcos was overthrown as president of the Philippines. When investigators traced his wealth, they found billions hidden across Swiss banks, Liechtenstein foundations, and offshore trusts scattered across the Caribbean. The world was horrified, and the immediate reaction was predictable. Offshore trusts must be criminal vehicles. That reaction was dead wrong. The criminal part was the theft from the Filipino people. The trust structures themselves were perfectly legal instruments that had existed for centuries. English common law developed the concept of the trust in the Middle Ages, originally so that knights leaving for the Crusades could place their land in the care of a trusted party. The legal frameworks hasn't fundamentally changed. A trust separates legal ownership from beneficial enjoyment. You transfer assets to a trustee who manages them according to terms you've defined. Once the assets are in the trust, they are no longer legally yours, even though you or your beneficiaries can still benefit from them. Here's where it gets interesting for wealth protection. If you establish a trust in a jurisdiction like the Cook Islands, Nevis, or Belize, the trust falls under that jurisdiction's laws, not your home country's. The Cook Islands International Trusts Act of 1984, amended multiple times since, contains provisions that make it extraordinarily difficult for foreign creditors to pierce the trust. A creditor must prove fraudulent transfer beyond a reasonable doubt. A criminal standard of proof applied to a civil matter, and they must file their claim within 2 years of the transfer. If they miss that window, the claim is extinguished entirely. No U.S. court order is enforceable in the Cook Islands for purposes of seizing trust assets. The numbers tell the story. According to legal analyses of asset protection jurisdictions published through 2025, no Cook Islands trust has ever been breached by a foreign creditor in the history of the statute, not once. The structure isn't theoretical, it's battle-tested across 4 decades. But, and this is the part that separates legal strategy from fantasy, you still report everything. As a U.S. person, you file IRS Form 3520 when you create or transfer assets to a foreign trust. You file Form 3520-A annually for the trust's financial activity. You report the foreign bank accounts held by the trust on your FBAR. The IRS sees every dollar. They know the trust exists, they know what's in it, and they can't touch it. Because the assets are legally held under the sovereignty of another nation's judicial system, the tax obligations remain. The asset protection is what changes. This is what the wealthy understood decades ago and what most people never learn. Compliance and protection are not opposites. You can be fully transparent with tax authorities, while simultaneously placing your assets beyond the reach of domestic lawsuits, creditor claims, and even certain government seizure actions. The offshore trust doesn't hide your money. It relocates its legal domicile. Ferdinand Marcos used these structures to steal. But the structures themselves are used every day by physicians protecting against malpractice judgments, business owners shielding personal assets from corporate liability, and families preserving generational wealth across borders. The tool is neutral. The intent determines everything. So the trust moves your assets to a jurisdiction where domestic creditors can't follow. But what if you could move yourself? Sign 2. Flag theory, the geometry of legal disappearance. In 1975, a financial theorist named Harry Schultz published a concept he called the 3-flag theory. The idea was simple and radical. No single government should have complete jurisdiction over your life. One flag for your citizenship, one for your business, one for your banking. Each function of your financial life planted in a different country, so that no single authority controlled the whole picture. By the 1990s, the concept had expanded to 5 flags: citizenship in one country, legal residence in another, ideally one with no income tax, business operations in a third, banking in a fourth, and your physical location, where you actually spend your time, in a fifth. Each flag is legal, each is reported, and together they create a structure where your wealth is diversified, not just across asset classes but across sovereign jurisdictions. This isn't hypothetical. It's the operating system of an entire class of people the modern world created but rarely discusses: permanent travelers, or as the financial press sometimes calls them, perpetual tourists. A person who holds citizenship in a country like Portugal, which has no tax on worldwide income for qualifying residents under its former non-habitual resident program, who banks in Singapore, which has some of the strongest bank secrecy protections remaining outside the CRS automatic exchange network for certain account structures, who operates a business through a UAE free zone company, which levied 0% corporate tax on qualifying income prior to its 2023 reforms and still offers significant advantages, and who physically lives between Thailand and Mexico. This person pays taxes legally in each jurisdiction, according to that jurisdiction's rules, and because no single country claims full taxing authority over the whole picture, the effective rate can be dramatically lower than someone earning the same income while planted in one place. The historical precedent is older than most people realize. The Rothschild banking dynasty built the most powerful financial institution of the 19th century on exactly this principle. Mayer Amschel Rothschild placed each of his 5 sons in a different European capital: Frankfurt, London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples. Each son operated under local laws, maintained local banking relationships, and held local political influence, that the family's wealth moved freely between all 5 notes. No single government could tax, seize, or control the whole. When Napoleon's wars disrupted one branch, the others compensated. When political upheaval at Vienna, assets were already distributed across 4 other sovereign jurisdictions. The Rothschilds didn't invent flag theory. They practiced it 2 centuries before anyone gave it a name. Today, the infrastructure is more accessible than ever. Countries actively compete for flag theory practitioners. Panama offers one of the most permissive residency visa programs in the Western Hemisphere. The Friendly Nations Visa grants permanent residency to citizens of over 50 countries with minimal financial requirements. Paraguay grants permanent residency with a bank deposit of approximately $5,500. Portugal's Golden Visa, despite recent modifications, still provides EU residency access through qualifying investments. Malaysia, Georgia, Uruguay, and Thailand all offer long-stay visa programs designed to attract mobile capital. The IRS knows about flag theory. They've known since the 1970s. And here's why they haven't shut it down. Because it's not a tax evasion scheme. U.S. citizens living abroad still file taxes. They still report foreign accounts. They still disclose foreign corporations and trusts. But the foreign earned income exclusion, detailed in IRS Publication 54, allows qualifying Americans abroad to exclude over $126,500 of earned income from U.S. taxation as of 2024. The foreign tax credit prevents double taxation on income tax by another country. These aren't loopholes, they're codified provisions of the Internal Revenue Code, designed to prevent the economic absurdity of taxing the same dollar twice. The difference between someone who uses flag theory and someone who doesn't isn't legality, it's architecture. One person puts every egg in one basket and prays the basket holds. The other distributes eggs across 5 baskets in 5 countries, each governed by a different set of laws, each offering different protections, each serving a different function. When you hear about someone whose bank froze their account, whose government seized their assets, whose currency collapsed overnight, every single one of those people had all their flags planted in one country. Everyone. Sign 3, the second passport, the key that unlocks every other door. In August 1938, a Jewish businessman named Otto Frank applied for visas for his family to emigrate from the Netherlands to the United States. The applications were denied, lost in bureaucratic delays and quota restrictions. His family went into hiding instead. You know the rest. Otto Frank's daughter was Anne Frank. The diary she kept in that Amsterdam attic became the most famous testament to what happens when people cannot leave. A passport is not a travel document. It is a permission slip from one government that determines which other governments will accept you. And when that permission is revoked, or when the issuing government itself becomes the threat, a single passport becomes a prison sentence. This is why the second passport industry exists, and it's why it has grown into a multi-billion-dollar sector, serving not criminals, but professionals, entrepreneurs, and families who understand that jurisdictional diversification applies to your person as much as your money. There are 2 primary legal pathways. The first is citizenship by investment, programs where sovereign nations grant citizenship in exchange for a qualifying economic contribution. St. Kitts and Nevis launched the first modern program in 1984. Today, Dominica, Grenada, Antigua and Barbuda, Vanuatu, and several others offer similar programs, with investment thresholds ranging from approximately $100,000 to $400,000 depending on the jurisdiction and investment vehicle. The second pathway is citizenship by descent or ancestry. Countries including Italy, Ireland, Poland, Hungary, and Portugal allow individuals to claim citizenship through documented ancestral connections, sometimes stretching back 3 or 4 generations. An American whose great-grandparent emigrated from Italy may qualify for Italian citizenship, and by extension, the right to live, work, and bank anywhere in the European Union. The strategic value is extraordinary. A second passport means access to a second banking system, a second legal jurisdiction, and a second set of political protections, all completely independent of your home country. If your primary country of residence experiences a banking crisis, currency collapse, or political upheaval, you have a legal right to relocate, open accounts, and operate economically under a completely separate sovereign system. Between 2019 and 2023, applications to Caribbean citizenship by investment programs surged by over 40%, driven primarily by citizens of countries experiencing political and economic instability. But the growth isn't limited to people fleeing crises. High net worth individuals from stable countries, the US, UK, Canada, represent a significant and growing share of applicants. They're not running from anything. They're building redundancy into their lives the same way engineers build redundancy into bridges. Here's the detail that brings this full circle. A second citizenship enables every other strategy we've discussed. The offshore trust becomes more powerful when the settler holds citizenship in a friendly jurisdiction. Flag theory becomes fully operational when you can legally reside in multiple countries. Foreign banking becomes dramatically easier when you're not applying as a foreign national but as a citizen. The second passport isn't just a third strategy, it's the skeleton key that activates the first 2. And it's all legal, reported, compliant. The US doesn't prohibit dual citizenship. The State Department acknowledges it explicitly. You report the second passport, you continue filing US taxes, you disclose foreign accounts and entities. The IRS gets their paperwork, and you get something the IRS can never take away: optionality. Here's what nobody in mainstream finance will tell you. The system you've been told to trust, the banks, the retirement accounts, the domestic currency, that system has failed populations more times in the last century than most people can count. Lebanon, Argentina, Cyprus, Greece, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Every single collapse was preceded by citizens who believed their system was different, that it was stable, that it couldn't happen here. The 3 methods we've covered aren't about paranoia. Offshore trusts, jurisdictional diversification, and second citizenship are the same tools that sovereign wealth funds, multinational corporations, and central banks use to protect their own reserves. The only difference is that nobody packaged these strategies in a way that ordinary people could understand. Until now, you don't need to be wealthy to start. You can open a foreign bank account with a few $1,000s and an afternoon of paperwork. You can research ancestry-based citizenship claims for free through public genealogical records. You can consult with an international tax attorney for the cost of a single month's rent. The cage isn't locked. The door has always been open. It's just that nobody made money by showing you where the handle was. The next time someone tells you to keep all your money in one country and one currency, under one government's authority, ask them how that worked out for the people of Beirut. Ask them how it worked out in Buenos Aires. Ask them how it worked out in Nicosia when the banks didn't open on Monday morning. Then ask yourself a harder question. If your government froze your accounts tomorrow legally under emergency powers that already exist on the books, what would you do? Where would you go? And whose laws would protect what's yours? If you don't have an answer, you now know where to start looking. Hit subscribe. This channel exists because the most important financial knowledge is the knowledge that systems don't want you to have. And I'll keep showing you where to find it.